And good evening, and welcome to the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight, a production of the Libertarian Party Affiliate Support Committee, Valerie Sarwak as chair, and the Libertarian National Committee, Joe Bishop Henchman chair. As always, we've got John Gapso on the big board, and I'm your host, Pat Ford, the proud chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. Joining us tonight, well, to say that he is the newly elected chair of the Libertarian Party of Maryland would be an understatement. Eric Blitz, congratulations on your, Saturday election as the chair of the Libertarian Party Maryland.
Thank you very much, Pat. Thank you for having me on.
No, we wanted to get you on right away because, it's exciting to get someone on board who has worked within the party for a number of years, is contributed both to virtually every facet of the effort in Maryland, clearly is deeply involved in the legislative process and as well as outreach, if you will, of the legislative process. So, when someone who like Bob Johnson, who was a very successful chair for so long, moves on, we wish him well. And I plan on having him on to my own meeting the next few weeks to kind of discuss his history and perspective of not just the Maryland party, but his overview of the national party. But to have someone involved who is seizing, if you will, the day and going to imprint his own unique vision. And that's what this show is about. We talk about affiliates, and we talk about the folks who lead those affiliates. And it can range from a number of facets: best practices, legislative issues, legislative challenges, events, activism, get out the vote efforts, candidate selection. We've spoken to probably about 10 affiliates in the last few months, vastly different states, vastly different issues once you get past, of course, the plague, vastly different approaches, but each one of them brings their personality, their insight, their work ethic into the unique situation, and we can learn from all of them. And as we talk about on all our libertarian programming, we can create an environment where affiliates work together. We need not be islands. Small states, big states, county affiliates, local affiliates, rural affiliates. We've all got a story to share. We've all got experiences to share. And we're hoping in this forum over the coming months that we literally get on as many affiliate chairs as possible, whether they be at the state or hyper local level. And we're going to reach out internationally to some of our friends in Europe and South America and Latin America to do the same. So Eric, first of all, as always, we always open up the show. There's a little bit of a formula here, but tell us about yourself and, your engagement with the party prior to your ascension as chair, and what was your libertarian moment? At what point in your life did you realize that I'm not going to take the easy path? I'm not going to be some high-paid, consultant or sitting on boards as one of those other parties. Nope. I'm actually going to stay true to my system and my beliefs and my roots and my philosophy. Have we offered you our condolences yet?
Yeah. Look, I look forward to the challenge. In Maryland, it's a 2-to-1 Democratic state and is not particularly friendly to liberty, but we have made inroads on issues that voters care about. And we just finished off a great convention where, in the middle of a pandemic, when you serve 74 plates, we had 74 attendees paid, and then probably 10 others that were guests of honor. So that's a pretty good turnout in the middle of a pandemic, 85 people. And it was well received. We had Jim Bovard, Carrie McDonald speaking on education issues, and we had Spike Cohen join us from Alaska, as he was with the Alaska Libertarian Party. And everybody had a great time. We elected myself, but also a fantastic executive board with a lot of really committed volunteers. And the great thing about Maryland right now, in the Maryland Libertarian Party, is it's very action oriented. It is a lot of people who don't want to just talk about how they will implement libertarianism in the perfect kind of utopian way, but instead really are committed to doing the hard work of building a party. And as far as myself, my first experience with libertarianism was probably through Ayn Rand when I was a teenager, and then in college, being exposed more towards the party. And unfortunately, I was a lawyer representing governments for a long time. I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and I couldn't take an active role in politics. So in 2010, when I was able to sell my firm, I could join in with full vigor, and that's what I did. And Bob Johnston, who served as a state chair for 14 years, did such a fantastic job of building a party that was welcoming to everybody. I think most of the people that are involved in the Libertarian Party of Maryland recognize that we have a good formula for success. As you are aware, if you let a lawyer just have free range, he will just talk and talk and talk. So I'll let you ask other questions.
As we like to say, people want to hear more about you than they really want to hear about me. But what was that? But there must have been a moment, in the cartoons, when you're talking about Bugs, who's one of my favorite philosophers, when the light bulb goes up above Bugs's head when he's got an idea. What was that moment in your life that really it shined the light?
Well,
an
from
epiphany,
the earliest age, I happened to be present at the Nixon speech where he said, "I am not a crook." The American people need to know that their president is not a crook. I was there, and I was a kid. I was pretty little. But I turned to my father and said, "The president could be a crook?" And it was a little bit of a light bulb moment where I said, okay, we can challenge some myth making that happens in American education about our politicians and the state. And, that was just an early childhood experience. The light bulb really went off when I started reading Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead. That brought me into some of the ideas of objectivism. I didn't really stay with objectivism necessarily past maybe 25, but I, not in grand opposition to it, I'm just saying I became more of I would say, a more well-rounded libertarian. And having done a lot of work in the government sector, whether on the legislative side or serving administrations, you see just how ugly the sausage making is, and so you become that much more steeled in your effort to correct those problems, because there are a lot of problems that libertarians are well versed at bringing a liberty solution to people, and that's what I hope to do in guiding Maryland. But when I say guiding, it's going to be a team effort. One person doesn't change any state. It's all about activating those people who have the desire to fight for liberty, to expand and protect liberty in Maryland, to get involved, feel that they have a space, feel that they have some skin in the game, and can actually get involved and do things. And we provide the tools to do that. So that part I'm really looking forward to continuing. And I should say Bob Johnston is not going anywhere. He just got elected by the executive board as the treasurer, which is probably the hardest job that you'll ever have in the Libertarian Party. That's what I did for the past year, and it's tough.
No, you're right. It absolutely is. I'm intrigued because of your background as an attorney, and I know we talked a little bit about this offline. And by the way, you're the first affiliate who's used what I thought was a Rhode Island term, which is sausage making. And let me tell you, as someone who's involved in some legislation right now, peripherally, that's going to attempt to address what is a nationwide problem, that is the underemployment issue, as unemployment benefits lure people away from the workforce, leaving companies unable to hire. Companies literally Imagine this: businesses surviving a year-long near shutdown, depending on where you are nationally, and then having all the fortitude, as you were, to do that, then have to compete against the federal government for employees.
Right.
If I'll divert a second, let me ask you a question. I define COVID in a political sense as libertarian proof of concept. When this first started, there was a general cry to people that, well, this shows you that there's no room for libertarians acting independently. You're in Maryland, which is one of the bluer states in the nation. Rhode Island is the bluest, but you're, I got to give you guys credit. You guys wanted to tax air and water. So, that puts you in a special category in my book. But how many times has even blue states like Rhode Island and Maryland resorted to distinctly libertarian, if you will, tactics to survive the pandemic?
Well, Maryland is a blue state, but there's a significant voice, especially in the rural areas, for liberty when it's contrasted with a very strong state action. And so when Governor Hogan, who's a Republican governor in this blue state, imposed the COVID restrictions, there was a Reopen Maryland effort to push back against the kind of the draconian and sometimes very irrational kind of distinctions that they were making, whether it's between essential workers or how you acted or what spaces you could go into. I represent some businesses who have had a very tough time during the shutdowns, and their eyes have been opened to the inability to have any argument against an executive power that uses emergency powers as a way of removing all checks and balances. One of the things we have on our hit list for legislation moving forward is to try to build a consensus around limiting the governor's power to unilaterally declare businesses closed through emergency powers. If we can spread the pain a little bit to the broader political environment, it may be harder for them to do. We're not, in a state like Maryland, very technocratic, very progressive. We're not going to completely eliminate all those powers, but we want to provide a lot of checks. And there's a lot of movements within a lot of states to limit executive power in this way. And I think we can make that argument. I think we can bring about a better libertarian solution. It's not ever going to be perfect in a state like Maryland, but we can get better results by being part of the conversation. And so we're going to try to push that.
Obviously, being part of that conversation means being part of the legislative process. Now, I know that you've had a great deal of experience, both as a libertarian and outside your libertarian life, dealing with this legislature and heading up efforts to be involved, as interject the Libertarian Party into the legislative conversation. Talk about your stint as, if you will, I'll call it the legislative director, advocate, and what kind of insight that's created for you in terms of steering the party, the Libertarian Party of Maryland, going forward.
So I highly recommend that all affiliates have a clear legislative agenda and try to encourage their volunteers to participate. It takes some time to build up both the knowledge and the skills, but mostly the networking capacity, who you know, because in arguing to my volunteers and the other members of the party that we need to increase our registrations, part of the argument is the politicians in the old legacy parties, they number count like nobody's business. And so one of the first things they ask you is, who do you represent? How many people do you represent? So if we have 15,000 registrations now, just because we lost so many due to losing ballot access, when we build up to say 50,000, now we have a stronger voice. But we can have real impact. That is, you can be a small organization and stand on principle, and therefore work with coalition partners like the ACLU of Maryland, Common Cause, even the Green Party, to work on issues that we can come to agreement on. Marijuana legalization was one that we worked on for many years together, formed coalitions with a lot of other organizations. So you leverage your commitment to principle as a way of building the party and libertarians' relevance to the political process. And that's why I spent so much time working on legislative things, was to focus on kind of raising our profile and raising our relevance to politics, because, you know, every libertarian's heard it before when asking for people to vote for our candidates. They say, well, you know, you don't have a chance, you're not relevant, any number of ways that they dismiss us. But if we can prove to our own supporters that we are having an impact, then we can build on those support. And that's what I try to do. We had great success finally in changing the way police conduct and misconduct cases are handled in Maryland, overturning one of the worst forms of restrictions on very pro-police officer. It's called the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. And well, we would normally think of a Bill of Rights as being protective. It was protective in all the wrong ways. So we got that overturned. And look, it wasn't the Libertarian Party that was the main mover by any stretch, but we worked on a lot of these bills for many years. And so the advocates that were in the advocacy community, we're well respected because we are at the table explaining why, well, if you craft the legislation this way, you may have a result, because libertarians tend to see the unintended consequences that we complain about a lot better than some of the mainstream parties. So we had a lot of great efforts this year on police reform.
No, and I want to point out that one of the importances of building coalitions is you get exposure as an organization and as a philosophy to a far greater body of people than, if you will, those people getting exposure to us. There's a halo effect that comes on working with shared issues and shared beliefs, even if that coalition is temporary, even if there's very often strong disagreement on other issues, because you're actively working, you're actively engaging in the political process with a far larger group of people than we could have as standing alone as libertarians. And you don't have to give up your core beliefs to do that, do you?
No, in fact, you gain power by being the principled person in the room. So one of the coalitions I worked with for many years, and we're still technically a part of, it's just that we've kind of had success and done the bills we wanted to do, but it was about open government, transparency. And so we worked with a lot of groups, including the Maryland Delaware Press Association and Common Cause, and a lot of the same advocacy actors. But when it comes time to decide how you're going to do a bill or write a bill, often it's the person or the group that is principled that allows you the outcome to be better. And eventually other parties start recognizing that. I would say the opposite has happened for us in cannabis. So, you know, we want as much freedom as possible on cannabis. And we've worked very hard on it for a long time, but it is a tax and regulate kind of proposition that is the only thing that seems to want to sell in Maryland. And that's harder and it becomes harder and harder for us to get behind, because it's so many barriers to entry, so many of the things that are the very same problems we point out with as being wrong with prohibition in it. You know, I'm an incrementalist at heart. That is, I'd rather get more liberty than wait around for getting the perfect liberty, because I know I'm in Maryland, I'm not going to get to it. But in cannabis, where you've got a lot of actors who are trying to sell, oh, we could raise so many taxes, and we by doing this, we can.
Right.
It becomes less principled, and so it's there's always frustrations in life. We're never going to get perfect, but we try our best, and we have I want to come back to the fact that, because I don't like making things about myself, we have so many great people in Maryland that are working on a whole lot of different issues. We have volunteers that went down and testified on some very anti-2A guns legislation. And so we've got a broad group of people that are interested in various issues. We've got somebody that's really into the homeschooling and wants to bring about reform in homeschooling in Maryland. These are all good things. I want to spread that out, because the great thing about liberty is it's so all-encompassing that you can almost touch every issue and bring about more liberty and bring about a libertarian solution that solves real people's problems so that they learn the benefit of liberty. That's kind of my approach. It's Carla Howell brought that to the party, at least to me, to my knowledge, with the Libertarian Solutions program, and I really have always bought into that.
No, absolutely, and I understand the challenges with cannabis. The MPP, the variety of different organizations that are out there are very happy to trade taxes and also Fourth Amendment protections in exchange for legalization. They are hellbound to get it legalized, and for some entirely legitimate reasons. But if nothing else, if the Libertarian Party stays principled in that perspective, it's always a case of the window, right? We're pulling the window back. We're informing the public that this is not necessarily the win-win a particular piece of legislation is, because we're showing the balance sheet, if you will. You're going to get this, but you're also going to give up that, and is that a decision you're willing to make? It's sort of an informed consent, if you will, on legislation. And on virtually every aspect of legislation, the Libertarian Party can play that role as the party of principle, and yet still, I believe, engage in a group effort to move liberty forward. It's a very fine balance, and it's situational, and it depends sometimes just on the goodwill of the people that you've engaged with. We all know the quote about strange bedfellows, and you're right. Until things change dramatically, we're going to be one of the smaller kids on the block for a while. But when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to strength of character, and I always say, for one very simple other reason, we will succeed, and that reason, of course, is that we are right, and that certainly helps. Let's talk about, though, your efforts, and John flashed it up on the screen. You talked about working to modify, or hopefully someday rid us of, the Policeman's Bill of Rights. That legislation in some modified boilerplate exists in state capitals around the country, and is really right now a significant barrier to the type of, and I'll call it euphemistic, police reform. I really mean something else, that's attempting to take place in this country in the wake of pure chaos, pure bloody chaos. People are getting killed on our streets. Young people are getting killed on the streets. I'd like to take a moment to remind people that even if you're guilty of the crime, guilty as hell, that still is not a tacit signature of your own death warrant. So, let's go into the weeds a little bit, because I think when I see libertarians impacting legislation, it just makes my heart burst. It's better than I can ever imagine, because I having testified myself countless times in person, and now the Zoomification of American politics, I know what a challenge that can be. So feel free to go in more into depth into your proposal and what you've written up in regard to that.
Okay, so I was in the write-up that you were referring to, that's on our website. I was really just applauding what we did accomplish, and look, the Libertarian Party, like you said, we're a small player, and this year, interestingly, I've testified for years before committees, and it can be frustrating because they do what's called put it in the drawer. They don't give it a vote. And so you don't really hear anything after you testified. It's like they pat you on the head and send you away. This year, I didn't testify once, yet I was much more effective because I was working with various people in the advocacy community to make strategic decisions. And a lot of that work occurred well before the legislation started. I mean, the General Assembly session started, but it's also just sending the emails and relying on your contacts that you've developed over the years, which is why I say every affiliate should get started, because you have to do it for a number of years before you start seeing results. You spend a lot of time behind the scenes advocating. So what happened in Maryland, I think the Washington Post and some other news organizations have pointed to the results in Maryland saying this could be a model for the nation. It's not perfect, let me tell you, as somebody who argued with various people about what it should be. I know all the things that I didn't like and don't like now, but it's incredible amount of progress. So the most important thing was the complete elimination of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. It gets replaced. That is, it is a bill that replaces it, but it replaces it with a civilian oversight system that is filled with checks and balances and ways to make the decisions with respect to police officer misconduct both transparent. So that's what's called Anton's Law. And I really don't want to get into the weeds of that, but basically you could file a complaint of misconduct and that was the end of your participation, because you weren't told what the result of the discipline was going to be, because they shielded under personnel records. Now we've restored that balance to what's called investigatory records, so that you can get those records once the investigation part is done. And that's really important. We got a lot of, probably the most important thing, I mean, a lot of print media focuses on getting rid of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which, you know, really wasn't really a Bill of Rights. It was a system designed to shield police officers from accountability. But I think the most important thing that happened in Maryland this session was the explicit use of force statute. So, and if people want to read what the basics of that are, and it's even got links to the bill, it's on the lpmaryland.org website. And the reason why that's important is it gets integrated with all of the other process things that make a police officer's conduct governed by what everybody should view as very reasonable and standard processes. That is, that when you're not doing what your goal is, which is to stop an illegal act, you're no longer supposed to continue applying that force. You are supposed to render first aid upon the cessation of the need for the use of force. Those kinds of things, it all sounds so human. That is what we would expect humans to do. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our institutions allow, especially when you don't have transparency, you know, one of my big messages, sorry to stop with it mid-sentence, but my biggest message in the transparency space to the legislators was that until you have transparency, you don't have public accountability. And when you don't have public accountability, that's when private misconduct becomes systemic. That's when everybody winks and starts covering up things. I mean, you probably have heard that we had a big scandal in Baltimore where a group of police officers were doing crazy things, manufacturing evidence and all that. That kind of systemic problem arises because there isn't transparency. You have to have a public accountability system. So the use of force changes are going to make probably the most important impact long term, because it gets integrated into the way police officers are trained. It gets integrated into the way they're managed, supervised. The They will be generating a lot of different reports to the General Assembly to follow up on. And I just think this was a very good first step. It will take a lot of work to continue to manage. That is, a lot of people are focused on body cameras. Well, body cameras is a complex and expensive thing to roll out. We made progress this year, but because it takes long periods of time to roll out, just, money wise, and it just takes a long time. Well, that gives opportunities for the opposition to come back and try to shave off some of that accountability, some of those systems. So we just got to keep fighting that. But, let's talk about something that wasn't successful. We had a bill. A version of it has been before the legislature for probably 5 or 6 years to dramatically limit the ability of police departments to purchase surplus military equipment. And it just it got passed out of the Senate, but didn't get through the House. I mean, they did kind of run out of time to do things, but that's something we're going to we didn't get past. And I really wanted that one. It wasn't as broad as I would want it. It's limiting things like weaponized drones and things like that. I was actually much more interested in limiting the kinds of things that are brought to protests, because you can easily increase the energy of confrontation by having a militarized response to an absolutely peaceful protest. And that we need to change, that dynamic where you can bring the riot gear out, and you get your commander to sign off on it, and now all of a sudden now you've got a police line that wasn't just a simple police line, but it looks much more like a National Guard line.
No, absolutely. And I'm curious, with all of this going on nationally, your attempts locally, what is the relationship between, say, police and the community at large, particularly in a city like Baltimore, which is troubled, to be blunt? I've spent a lot of time in Baltimore. It's a wonderful city in a lot of ways, but it's troubled. Is that improving, or is that reflective of sort of the national environment?
That's hard for me to judge. I'm optimistic by nature, so I think it's improving. But I'm also a little cynical by having watched it for years. I mean, I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, which kind of is like a planned suburban community that was incredibly easy to be a libertarian kid. It was just, everything was easy. But, in sports, I would travel into the city and to other places where people were not treated like I was being treated. I mean, you could see it as a kid. And Baltimore's got those problems where, the urban poor are not going to be treated like some suburban kid. And it's unfair, it's unjust under the law. And whether it will be changed just by passing laws, let's wait and see. It's going to take a lot of work by old legacy party politicians, which are not always that great. I mean, one reason why we really need the Libertarian Party candidates to be elected to office is that when they're in the room, they start having the ability to ask the really tough questions. When you're just in the advocacy community, a little bit of like a backbencher. You're complaining and pointing out and saying, here, problem, solve it. When you have the power to start participating, like we've gained with Marshall Burt, he gets to do things in that legislature, and that's just critically important. So, one of our tasks is build the infrastructure that supports liberty, to get more registrations, get more members, get more funding for the local party, so that we can help better support our candidates and do candidate training. That's going to be a big part of 2021 and the early part of 2022. now National is running the regional training. We're going to try to send as many of our Maryland candidates and volunteers that would work on those campaigns down to our Region 5 training seminar to participate, gain those skills that they can come back and use for the next 2 decades. Because we have a lot of young people who are somewhat new to the party, and some of the older veterans too would love to get better trained in how to do a real campaign, and I'm very excited about that.
No, that's excellent. And just sort of a closing note about the policing issue. There's an organization, not part of the Libertarian Party, but staffed by a handful of libertarians, called the Rhode Island Accountability Project, and it's at riaccountabilityproject.com. And astonishingly enough, they maintain a database of internal affair complaints in virtually every city in Rhode Island. There's a handful that they're still in progress with. And imagine the warm embrace they get from the law enforcement community by that. They've actually put them in a searchable database. And some of the stuff is redacted, and there's literally a court battle a year over it, and they fight it in partnership with our ACLU. But, we're going to be doing a dramatic reading of some of these on some local programming soon, and I'll keep you posted on that. But that's proven to be an invaluable tool simply because it exists. The notion that it exists and demands information, of course, creates a spotlight, if you will, that hadn't existed before. And then when it gets the information it needs, it's directly accessible to literally anyone in the community. So it's a signature issue for us, and I applaud your involvement at a highly organic level and not sitting on the sidelines and waiting for bills to be dictated to you. It's, again, I recognize the level of work that's involved with something at that scale. Folks, if you're just joining us, we are here with none other than Eric Blitz. He is the freshly minted, the new arrival, the newly born chairman of the Libertarian Party of Maryland. He's into his tenure now for about a day and a half, and we're already demanding great things of him. I think that's how it goes in our world, doesn't it?
So I'll turn around and demand great things from our supporters and volunteers, and we'll be set.
There you go. Let's talk about some other issues. Right now we're at sort of in Maryland this sort of quiet time where there are a number of people who are actively contemplating and ruminating and working diligently behind the scenes in what should be a series of very interesting announcements coming in the next few months. And on your affiliate spotlight, we're going to keep you in touch with that, because we're interviewing folks on a weekly basis, but we're developing relationships. And we're hoping that, for example, like Alaska did, when there's an event or a candidate, that we're going to stay in touch with them and sort of give you little updates every week. What is the candidate selection process like in Maryland? And this touches on the affiliate structure itself. How does someone become an anointed, if you will, endorsed candidate of the Libertarian Party of Maryland?
So the Libertarian Party nominates their candidates in convention, which is basically by the state central committee taking a vote. And usually we set a time where we announce when we're going to nominate candidates for a particular position if there is competition. Unfortunately, I mean, let's be realistic. I would rather have more competition for our slots. We don't usually have that competition. And so we hear from them. We have a state central committee that asks a lot of tough questions, especially of people that are new to the party and might be recent transfers. They really want to know where their positions are on the platform. We've got people that have been with this party for a long time, including the National Party, Dr. Dina Maude, Stu Sims. These people, Jerry Schneider, have worked for the party for a long time. They hold those candidates strongly accountable. So we nominate in convention. We will do a lot of recruiting. Unfortunately, during the last election, we could only vote for Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen because we were so busy trying to just get reestablished ballot access. I mean, trying to petition during a pandemic, even though we got relief through a federal lawsuit that we undertook. And we got some administrative relief that was very important on electronic signatures. It was very tough, and we couldn't get to the kind of candidates that we really want. So in 2022, we hope to run a full slate for Congress, Senate, governor, comptroller, lieutenant governor, and some local offices. You know, we've got a lot of people that are interested in running for local office, and one of my jobs, as I see it, is to impart my knowledge of local government law to those people that are interested in it, because that allows them to be better prepared for their campaigns and you know, pick that one issue that would resonate with a local audience instead of you know, you can't go to argue for a town council and the Fed. I mean, it just doesn't going to ring true to the intended audience.
No, and that's, as I mentioned to you offline, a little bit of a feedback issue tonight. As I mentioned to you offline, we do a candidate's corner every Friday night with the stated goal of celebrating and our down ballot candidates and giving our down ballot candidates an opportunity to appear on a national, semi-national stage. You know, and you know, in a friendly, colloquial, I should say, collegial environment, and allow folks to kind of get their feet wet, making a stump speech and appealing to a larger national audience. And I look forward to working with candidates from all over Maryland in this upcoming cycle for that. And I think we all recognize when we look at the Moulton maneuver in Pennsylvania, the success folks have had in the number of affiliates nationwide in going after those entry level in terms of recognition, but those so critically important races for the Libertarian Party. It allows candidates to build a resume. It allows candidates to build an organization. It gives candidates an opportunity to build name recognition. And, you know, when I look at your engagement in the legislative process and I look at candidate recruitment, all of this gives folks, if you will, outside of our libertarian bubble, an opportunity, and very often the first time in their life, to see libertarian candidates and leaders working to steward our assets. We don't use the word governing here, Eric. It's that's a bad word. We use the word steward. So how many affiliates do you have right now? How finely broken down is the state of Maryland? And is that going to be an area of focus?
So what we've done is set them up as committees so that they can avoid full affiliate status, just because all it does is burden them with a lot of campaign finance compliance and other problems with officers and things like that that we found just haven't really been useful. So we have all these groups that you're showing on the page now. They're at various levels of activity, and you know, I see a few on there that have actually stopped being active because, you know, people move on. We had Western Maryland had a great guy, but you know, he moved on. He just couldn't do the work anymore. We have David Dull in Anne Arundel County has done a fantastic job with that local affiliate. Doug Stanley and Phil Dassing have done a great job with Baltimore County. Baltimore City is not as active as it was, but you know, they had a great event where they had Marilyn Mosby, the attorney, the state prosecutor, that has stopped all prosecutions of possession offenses, prostitution, all the kind of the nuisance crimes. And she's gotten some national recognition for doing it. Well, we had her at a Libertarian Party event. She probably didn't know what a Libertarian, although I don't know, she sounded pretty sophisticated politically. But she, you know, it was really nice. And that's what I really try to stress in Maryland is let's organize locally so that you can bring a libertarian solution to your local voters. Ask them what they care about and then demonstrate how that libertarian ideology that you hold can bring improvements to their lives. And I get it. It can be very difficult argument sometimes. You know, people are being oppressed by the drug war, and yet we'll still try to hold on to it for some moral claim that, well, we don't want to encourage drugs. You know, it's none of this is easy, but it can still be rewarding. And I think a lot of our libertarians in Maryland feel rewarded by working at the local level. So we've got a couple of good affiliates. We're going to work hard to continue to build them up. You know, some of them are even talking about recruiting their own local candidates to run. And, you know, for example, in Anne Arundel County, I think we're going to have two local candidates in 2022. Maybe it's more. If anybody's listening from Maryland and they want to run for office, please contact me. We're going to have a really strong effort with some really talented people like Kyle O'Donnell, Crystal Woodworth. We're going to have those people working to build the infrastructure to support new candidates. You know, even at national, we've got the candidate support and the affiliate support. So, and like you said at the beginning, we can all learn by looking around to our neighbors, the other affiliates, see what they're doing and learn by it. I think it's just, it's a good time to be a libertarian.
The last area that I wanted to focus on a little bit before we get to our segment every week, which we call shameless self-promotion, you know, I was struck at looking at that list of affiliates, if you will, or near affiliates, and a lot of it was organized on a county basis. And again, this is almost a mantra now on the show. I'm struck by the complexity of the state of Maryland, and I've spent a lot of time in Maryland. It's a spectacular place. You know, I've been blessed to spend time on the Eastern Shores. Got good friends outside of Baltimore, and you know, in and around DC. Not as much time in the western part of the state, sadly. But you know, you look at an Anne Arundel County, which to many people is really the heart of if you will, metropolitan Maryland. And then you look at you know, the Eastern Shores, which, you know, if folks, if you're not from the East Coast and you're doing that tour and you're doing DC and all that, make some time to spend an overnight on the Eastern Shores, because that whole is starting from Delaware down to Maryland, down to Virginia. It's almost like another planet, really. It's another world. And it's one of those places that's not the easiest to get to, but you need to make a point. So take a left-hand turn at Annapolis, I think. You go over the bridge and all of a sudden you're in God's country. It has a feel like Ireland or Western France. It's that beautiful. But again, you've got multiple major media markets. You've got the DC media market, you got the Baltimore media market, and then you've got a handful of other diverse areas, which are almost states unto themselves, if you will. How big of a challenge has that been for Maryland as a party? And have you had any successes, or is that something that you feel like you need to work on this go around?
Well, I view it as an asset. And the reason I do is when you've got a lot of diversity of living styles, you get a diversity of viewpoints. And so that we have, just on the Eastern Shore that you mentioned, we have the Upper Eastern Shore, the Middle Eastern Shore, Lower Eastern Shore. They be able to provide input to us that I might not otherwise see. I've spent a good deal of time in Eastern Shore, but their experience with government and their challenges that their people are facing are obviously dramatically different than the Washington suburbs or Baltimore. And so in that sense, having that diversity allows us to have a broader context for what kind of overall messaging we're doing, so that we're not just talking about one type of issue, because there's people that, you know, want to talk about their favorite issue. I think we are pretty balanced. We talk about a lot of different issues. I want to slowly begin to narrow some of those so that we do what I call owning issues, so that we start getting credit for certain issues. You know, one of the frustrating things to me is that the Libertarian Party has led on cannabis since the beginning. We've led on something like marriage equality, but you know, we're not really getting a whole lot of, in the public sphere, the accolades for having taken that leadership. We go on that edge and fight and then everybody else catches up and says, look what we did. And,
Right.
So I do want to, in Maryland, have us focus on some issues that we can own. One of the things there's two things I really want to focus on in Maryland in the next year, and that's building our registrations. I want to get to 1% of our total registrations, slightly above that. And second, I want to have us focus on an issue that allows us to kind of make waves, and that be our issue. And sometimes it's just asking what the voters care about the most, and then saying, okay, what are our solutions to that problem? So here's an example. The number one issue in poll after poll after poll, probably true in most states, but I know Maryland, is jobs. You ask what the number one issue is, people say jobs. Well, we know what the Republicans and Democrats have said for generations about jobs. Well, we can, grand promises, but I think we have a narrative that's equally valid and important to express that can both build our base, but also build adherence. And that is, the free market can do a lot of things that for your jobs, that all you need to do is create the conditions upon which and lower the barriers to entry that government has created. So whether it's licensing reform or taxes or the incredible amount of regulation that we have at the local level that inhibits businesses, we could make the point. This is the libertarian solution on how you actually build jobs. I'm not sure we have quite the weight for that argument yet, but that's the kind of argument that am striving to make.
I agree with you 100% on that. It's interesting because on one level we need to reinforce the notion that government does not create jobs, but on the other hand, government interference in markets. And again, I'll use this as a national spotlight around America right now. Employers are actually having trouble getting people of the government interfering in the jobs market, costing employers money, costing employers opportunities. Then you've got governments then attempting to rejigger some type of artificial Rube Goldberg-like approach to overcoming that obstacle, which then again, of course, we know will create its own series of administrative, legislative, financial, and God only knows what else, unanticipated consequences, nightmares. When in fact, simply the government walking away from interfering in markets, and they do this in so many other examples. This is just one national issue that's on the forefront right now. Just simply getting the hell out of the way and allowing entrepreneurs to do what they do. We face an irony. I think I mentioned this on the outset of the show right now. We face the irony right now that we've got countless American businesses run by every imaginable individual background who managed to survive the pandemic and all the financial disasters that came along with a national economic shutdown, who may not survive the business boom that is beginning to occur in places all around the nation. And again, it was government broke it. Now we feel like government has to fix it. And it compounds itself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say to people anymore to get them to understand that the first goal of government should be to do no harm. Do you think it's possible, as someone with your legal background, that we can get some form of Hippocratic oath for politicians? Or am I hallucinating?
They would never agree to that. And we know that they wouldn't, because we've got just all the evidence that they aren't really principled. They care more about power, and politics gives them that power. And they use that power for a lot of negative reasons that we can point to and say wrong, but they would never agree to that kind of principle. What we need is to elect libertarians. And look, I'm no Green, but I've worked with the Green Party. I'd be happy with some Greens get elected in Maryland too, because at the very least, what they would be is principled enough to point to the Democrats and say, well, look what we support. And I'm quite willing to have that discussion with the Greens as a libertarian about what is the right policy. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the number one goal of any politician or any executive, bureaucrat, or the government itself should be do no harm. But they don't think that way, and we're going to need to be at the table to be able to explain that to them and explain the value of that to the public. I think we're a long way off from that, but you know, it's a fight that's worth having.
Absolutely. Eric, we're getting to our last segment, but again, if you're just joining us at the very end here, it's worth a repeat. Eric Blitz is the freshly minted, the newly anointed, if you will, chair of the Libertarian Party of Maryland. Just a couple of days into his term, someone who's been involved with the party though for a number of years on a number of different levels. We've talked about everything from, well, the legislative process intensely, and I think this is really one of the first shows that I've had an opportunity to have that conversation with someone like yourself, and it thrills me to see that the immersion that you and other party members have engaged in that process. It's very, very exciting. It's really, in my mind, it's really a prototype that other parties can look to, and I hope you'll share that. And I hope you'll share your experiences with folks at other affiliates. This is one of my favorite segments. Let's engage in some shameless self-promotion of the party. Right now, like I said, you're in sort of a lull with candidates. So talk about how folks in Maryland,
Libertarian Party,
now or in the future, can get involved at an organic level, find their joy with the Libertarian Party of Maryland.
Okay, so, you know, our website is lpmaryland.org, but I think the most effective way is reaching out to our Facebook pages. Look for your local county libertarian group. We've got one in a Facebook page for every one of them, and somebody will respond. And the more densely populated ones have active groups that they're working to build. So you can also always just email me at ericblitz@lpmaryland.org, or as soon as we get the transfers done of things, it'll be chair@lpmaryland.org. But really, Facebook, we're very well organized on and is an easy way. But you can, you know, there's plenty of ways to get involved. Come to the local meetings of a local group and you will meet people. And by meeting other libertarians, you will gain the confidence that you can continue to actually do something in politics to change your life and your life prospects and that of your family. And that's really what it's all about, is getting involved with other people, because you just gain the confidence. If it's just something that's kind of remote and you're just arguing back and forth on Facebook, you might convince some people to change their mind, but my guess is not likely. You're more likely to change somebody's mind by having a fruitful conversation over a beer. And that's what the local groups often allow to happen in a way that builds progress.
There's that moment when you enter a room, and it might be your first convention, it might be your first meetup, and you don't know anybody, and someone comes over and greets you, and you start to engage in a conversation, and all of a sudden, and we've all felt it at some time. For a lot of us, it's been many years, but that moment when you first engage with another libertarian and you realize, my God, there's someone who completes my sentences, who thinks in the same manner that I do, has many, not all, but many shared opinions. And there's a sense of relief. And yet there's also a sense of joy.
Yeah.
Because at that moment you realize you've got family. We are not just a political organization. We are not just a group of individuals who arrive at some sort of meeting point in order to advance our own personal life goals, as is so often the case with the duopoly. We are an extended family, one that can quarrel pretty well at times, but we share a philosophy. We share a belief system. Our platform means something to us. our state or principles is our DNA. And people will argue to the nth of the world to defend those against other outside political bodies, outside organizations. We are the party of principle. And what's remarkable to me as I get into my year plus of doing some programming and God, I thank the Libertarian Party for this opportunity. When I meet folks for the very first time, as I did, Eric, virtually, if you will, this afternoon, the conversation was almost immediate. There was no awkward gaps. There was no, what do you think about this? It was just an instant shared connection, and that happens so often. And that's why, folks, if you're listening to this for the first time or you have family or friends, get them to come to a meeting, introduce them to a couple people, make them feel comfortable, feel at home, and let the magic happen. And, there are folks in this organization who are literally changing the world simply because they reached out and they were embraced, if you will, by a local libertarian community. They're literally changing the world. And we all know who they are. Eric,
Very
listen,
well
thanks. Listen, one more time. And if you had one thing to say right now to the libertarian community, I know you had a chance to have your acceptance speech probably, and you accepted the handshakes and the warm congratulations of the folks in your movement. But if you had one thing to say to the nation, if you will, about the Libertarian Party of Maryland, if you could give us a line or two, just what you think of their power and their competency and what they're able to accomplish. Why don't you leave us with that thought?
I would say convert ideas to action, because without action, ideas are mere abstractions. When you apply ideas to action, that's where the hard work comes, but it's also where the satisfaction of having done things and changing things. And people can change things if they do that. So convert ideas to action.
That's outstanding. I just wrote that down. I am stealing that. Thank you.
It was great being with you, Pat.
Absolutely. Folks, you've been listening to the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight, a production of the Libertarian Party Affiliate Support Committee, Valerie Sarwak, Chair, and of course, the Libertarian National Committee, Joseph Bishop Henchman, Chair. As always, I thank John Gapso, working the big board here. He's the one who gives you the graphics and the links to legislation and the maps of the counties and all of that. And he joins us after working a full and rewarding day, 2 nights a week as a volunteer. And every week, every show, I want to make sure that folks give him a quiet handshake, if you will, for doing so. My name is Pat Ford. As always, I am the chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. We will meet together again Friday evening at Candidates Corner at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on StreamYard. You can find us on the LPTV page. Take a moment to like that. Or, of course, you can find us here at the Libertarian Party Facebook page. We're grateful for your participation. This will be up. Please share it and comment and point out the things that you admire. Let's inject positivity into this off season so that we can get fired up. And I just want to say one last thing. Let's convert ideas to action. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you Friday night.